everyone. This is Biruda here. I am the founder and advisor of iGuideGlobal.in. This is an initiative which I have created to guide and assist students in the admission process for studies abroad. I have been into this field mentoring students, advising them with their various career options for the past decade or so. It's my passion to see that each and every student comes out successfully and gets an admission into a reputed university abroad. In this series about studies abroad, today we are going to be discussing the different aspects about the GRE test. The GRE test stands for Graduate Record Examination. We will be talking about who takes the GRE, what is the need for you to take the GRE, how do you go about preparing for the GRE, what is GRE all about, what are the advantages of GRE, and how should one prepare for the GRE test. These would be some of the aspects that I'm going to be covering in this topic today in the series that I'm going to be presenting at Anil Nair classes in the studies abroad. So let us now find out who takes the GRE. This is meant for students who are applying for the master's program, the PhD program, and of late recently from 2011, the GRE is also accepted for the MBA aspirants. There are a few MTech courses in India like the IIITB in Hyderabad and Bangalore which also accept the GRE scores. It is a common measure for comparing applicant qualifications who are applying for the graduate studies. As per the report of ETS 2011, there are about 6 lakh prospective graduate students globally who take the GRE every year. Next, let us find out why is it important for students who are aspiring to apply for studies abroad. What is the importance of why they should be looking at taking the GRE test? What is its importance in the admission criteria? Now, let me give you a brief about the different admission criteria and where GRE fits in. The different admission criteria that most of the universities, whether you are applying for a master's, the PhD or the MBA programs would look at would be the academic record followed by the GRE scores. Then you'll also be sending them some extracurricular activities which will be outlined in your career goal statement, that is the statement of purpose. And there will also be certain recommendation letters that you would be sending as a part of your application. So the admission criteria would depend on the sum total of all these parameters, GRE being one of the criteria. Now please remember the GRE is just 1/3 of the application process. It is not the sole deciding factor as far as the admissions is concerned. You also need to remember that there are no cutoffs as far as the university admissions are concerned. It is a very subjective score based on a certain range of score that the university looks at every year from the applicant pool. Now that you have decided to take the GRE, you need to then find out when is the right time for you to plan and take the GRE. Ideally, for fresh graduates, if you are looking at applying for a master's program, you should be targeting to take the GRE a year prior to your graduation. For example, if you are looking at applying for the application intake of 2014, which starts usually in the August month, you should be looking at completing the GRE by November mid of 2013, that is this month mid. The reason being that there are certain deadlines that the universities have before which you need to submit your scores, and you also need to be submitting the various application documentation that has been listed on this slide. So which means if you plan in advance, the whole process would take you about 6 to 8 months of a timeline. What I intend to mention here is that proper planning would definitely come in handy to avoid last minute rush. So let us now find out what is this GRE all about. As mentioned earlier, the name would stand for Graduate Record Examination. So which means it is evaluating your readiness for graduate level studies. It is a common measure across the globe for students who are applying for graduate studies of any kind, based on their verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, critical thinking and analytical writing skills. So which means that the same GRE is taken by all the students who are aspiring to apply for graduate studies across the globe, whether it's Indian students, whether it's Chinese students or South African students. It's just so that they want to ascertain that you have the same level of skills as far as your verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning skills are concerned, which will also make you eligible for competing for different admissions to different universities of repute. Of late, in the year 2011, ETS has changed the pattern of the GRE. Now, why has this GRE changed? It has been evolving for a long time, ever since, but the recent change has been made to align it to the graduate and the business school programs. The recent changes that have been added to the GRE changes, we will be seeing in the next slide shortly. As per what I have been mentioned, that the GRE pattern has changed recently, let us now find out what have been the current changes. What is the new GRE pattern like from 2011? What if you notice in this slide, there have been marked changes in the scoring pattern. There are also changes in the number of questions and the question types as per verbal and quantitative sections are concerned. There is also a change in the total time that the students can avail of while taking the test. To give you certain pointers here, earlier on the old GRE was out of 1600, with the analytical writing section being on a scale of 6 as a standalone section. Each of verbal and quant were on the scale of 800, 200 to 800. Whereas if you look at the new pattern now, the scoring pattern has become more compact and concise, with 1 point increment in the scores. The quant and the verbal sections are now scored between 130 and 170 each. A good score on the 340 for the verbal and the quant which would make you competitive as a student would be 320 plus. On the analytical writing, the score band remains 0 to 6, and the competitive score there would be a 4 on the essay section, each of the issue and the argument. As mentioned in the earlier slide, let's look at the details of the test structure of the revised GRE. What I have mentioned here is giving you a proper structure of the test. You will find that the section type, the number of sections, the number of questions, the time taken and the score. Let us look at each of it more carefully. What has happened in this new pattern is that you would see more number of questions in terms of quantitative and verbal. The analytical writing section has not changed from what it used to be in the earlier pattern. In the quantitative section, you would have 20 questions each. You will have 2 such sections, and for the time for each of this section would be 35 minutes. The scores that you would be getting would be in 1 point increment for each correct answer, and the range would be from 130 to 170. As for the verbal is concerned, you will also have 2 sections, 20 questions each, 35 minutes on each section, again 1 point increment in scores, and the score range still remains the same, 130 to 170. So which means the total verbal and quant scores put together would be 340. A good score on this, as mentioned earlier, would be 320. Analytical writing would comprise of 2 topics, one which would be the argument and the second which would be the issue. Each of these essays would be given a 30-minute time frame. The scores that you would get on each of these essays would be on a band of 0 to 6. A good score would be around 4 on the scale of 6. Now this GRE that has changed recently is basically a multi-stage adaptive test. So which means that your scores would depend upon how you attempt the previous question. So you have to be very careful as to how you have been attempting the questions in the time frame given. The performance of the second level of the section, for example, if your performance on the quantitative 2 section would depend on how well you have performed on the quantitative 1 section, and likewise for the verbal section. Having seen the GRE test structure and what has changed from the previous test to the recent test, let us try and find out what could be some of the test taking strategies for a test taker. First and foremost, you need to bear in mind that your performance on the previous section of any particular topic, for example quantitative, would basically affect your performance on the second section. So you need to be very careful how you are answering the questions. Now since it is a computer based test, You should be able to skip and return to the question later if you're not sure of the answer. You can preview and review you have a preview and review flexibility within a section. You also have the flexibility to move from one question to the other. You can edit or change the answers if you feel they are not correct. You also can attempt the easier questions first. According to me, this is a very good advantage in a test, in this current test pattern. I would say if you have to make maximum use of the time and to pocket good number of points, please use this strategy very carefully. Attempt the easier questions first and then move on to the more difficult ones, because the test is structured in a way where you will be able to bag more and more points. In the quantitative section, it is also simplified because you have the use of online calculators which is available. You can also use scratch paper if if you want to write down some points in verbal. Okay, so please use all these strategies well, so that you can improve your score as much as possible. I would also say if you're not very certain and if things are getting very difficult in a particular question, try and use the process of elimination. Now, having understood the pattern of the test, it is important for you to know certain things about the GRE on the tip of your fingers. You need to know how to register for the test, who conducts it, and how are the test scores going to be available to you. So let's find out one by one. As I had mentioned earlier, the GRE test has been developed and administered by the ETS, that is Education Testing Services, New Jersey. The test, for the convenience of the student, is conducted throughout the year, 7 days a week. 7 days a week. You would have to register for the test online on the website gre.org. The current cost of the test registration is $190. Now, in this $190 fee that you're paying for test registration, you would be able to avail free score reporting to 4 colleges of your choice, which I should say that students should use very carefully. They should have a good amount of knowledge of the universities and the courses that they want to select by the time they take the GRE test. They should not look at selecting the universities just haphazardly and randomly based on friend inputs, peer inputs, and just by looking at some university names. The scores are valid for a good number of 5 years. So which means even if you decide you want to take the test in your pre-final year, you could keep the scores and then apply maybe a couple of years later after probably getting some industry work experience. The scores are available immediately after you take the test, especially on the verbal and the con sections. So you will be finding a screen which will give you the scores for the verbal and the quantitative sections out of the 340. Based on this, you would be able to key in the 4 colleges if you have done proper research earlier on. The GRE can be retaken after 60 days and not more than 5 times a year. So if you want to take a reattempt on the GRE, you would have to wait for around 60 days and then retake the GRE, taking care that you improvise your score at least by 20 points in the next attempt. You're free to choose which scores you want to report to the universities. So you could either report the earlier scores or the later scores. That is left, the choice is left to you, provided of course the later scores are better than the earlier scores. Having said enough about the GRE score and having bagged a good GRE score, is that enough to get an admission into a good reputed university abroad? I would say 1/3 the battle is won here. You have a great decent score of GRE, let's say 320 plus. You have great academics. But what also matters, equally important in the admission process, is the rest of the admission process guidance. How you select the universities, whether they suit your profile, whether they have the right course that you want to apply to, whether they are accepting students of your profile. How do you go about presenting your documents, which are the statement of purpose, which is your career goals? How do one put down your resume? And most of the times universities would require a one-pager resume. How should you get the recommendation letters and whom should you ask them for? How do I go and speak to a visa officer? How do I present myself in an interview. These are very common things that bog down students, and since the admission process is time consuming and tedious, professional help from experts would definitely help you. Let me tell you how we at iGrad Global can help you. We have been into this field, as mentioned earlier, for a decade plus. So which means we have the expertise of having guided 2000 plus students globally in different countries. Different courses, there have been niche courses like computational fluid dynamics, financial engineering, you name it and you have it. The other advantage of this professional guidance would be you would also be able to get convenient and effective online counseling. The entire model of this process is devised in such a way that students can access the counseling from wherever they are, pan India, at this point of time. There would be regular online webinars and workshops at each step of the process from expert advisors. If this is not enough, we also offer mentoring through an advisory panel of past students. Now, they always say that experience counts. So if some of the students have had a similar profile as yours, they would be more than glad to help you in addressing a few of your admission queries. In a nutshell, iGrad Global would guide you in all the steps of the admission process very professionally and see that you succeed in your journey to get admissions into graduate studies at top reputed colleges. So having said that, your pathway to success begins here at iGrad Global. You might wonder what this name stands for, but when I took the initiative of starting iGrad Global, it just simply means I graduate globally. So as the name suggests, we start right from counseling you regarding your specializations. In my experience, many a times I've noticed that students are not very clear about which course and which specialization to select. For example, a student would come and say, "Ma'am, I would want to do a master's in computer science." Then I would go further and ask him, "Could you tell me what under computer science?" He would say, "Computer science. I mean, that's what I want to do." But you should be aware that computer science is a very vast subject. So at a master's level, it is always good to specialize. Having specialized in one particular specialization gives you an edge over other students when you look for career opportunities. For example, if a student has done a master's computer science with networking as a specialization, he has a better earning potential than a student who has done a plain simple computer science master's. So this is how we shortlist the universities for you. Secondly, we also take into consideration constraints that you have as far as the selection of universities are concerned. In terms of location, if you want to look at US, you want to look at any other countries, or if you have any cost constraints, you want to look at a 1-year program or a 2-year program. The third and the most important step to your success would be the evaluation of the documents. Now, this is a very intricate and elaborate task, and we have experts who would guide you on evaluating your SOPs, your essays, and your resume, and the recommendation letters. We will try to put in your best strengths and potential forward so that you are able to present your application with your full potential. We'll also guide you on helping the application, filling the application forms in the financial statements for the queries that you would have. Last but not the least, once you have secured an admission into the university, the job does not end there. What if you do not make it through the visa? Hence, we would provide you with expert guidance on the visa documents and also conduct mock interviews wherever required. So in a nutshell, we would be handholding you in the entire application process, right from your test prep till the time you actually fly to your destined university. Having spoken to you about the entire application process and the test, that is the GRE test, and how you prepare on the various aspects of the GRE test, and how finally you get an admission into a good reputed global university, let me quote some references. You could refer to the gre.org for your GRE test prep and registration. You could also refer to the TOEFL.org, which is a language test. you need to take in addition to GRE. For any other queries on the admissions, you could contact me at biruda@iGradGlobal.in. I also have listed down my website here, that is www.igradglobal.in, and I've also mentioned my phone number. For any test preparation related queries, you could get in touch with Anil Nair Classes. The contact information would be info@anilnairclasses.com. The website would be anilnairclasses.com, and of course, you could contact us on the phone. We have a center at Amirpet, and the number would be 829-721-2234. Thanks a lot for hearing me out.